Want to know how to get the same cell coverage for up to half the cost? Well, instead of spending a fortune building and maintaining their own cell phone towers, Consumer Cellular just pays to use the same towers as the largest carriers and passes the savings on to you. Pretty smart, huh? Consumer Cellular. When freedom calls, we're here to answer. Call us at 1-888-FREEDOM.
Half the cost savings based on cost of Consumer Cellular single line 5 GB data plan with unlimited talk and text compared to lowest cost single line postpaid unlimited talk, text, and data plan offered by T-Mobile and Verizon May 2023.
This week on We Are Not Journalists.
And then I put in one bad apple.
A bad apple.
Horrible apple. Gross, malformed, discolored.
Oh, a disgusting, terrible apple.
Terrible apple.
And you put it in the pie with the other ones.
With the good apple.
With a bunch of good apples.
Really good apples, Max.
Do you know what that sounds like? It sounds like a good pie. Well, okay, so people complain that, like, police misconduct is typically a couple of bad apples. So, like, is there maybe some subtle genius in collecting those bad apples, putting them in a sack, and then throwing that sack at protesters?
I would say no.
Hello and welcome to a very special, potentially award-winning episode of We Are Not Journalists. I'm Maximilian Clark.
I'm Walter Masterson.
And, we're a couple of white guys, We're
Yes.
We're
not going to apologize for being white.
Not today, my friend. Eventually, but not today. No. Today we are doing something braver than that.
What are we doing, Max?
You've heard of the police?
Yeah.
You know how they're supposed to protect people and communities?
Yeah, and they do a damn good job of it.
You know what? I am going to go out on a limb, and I know we're going to lose some listeners over this. Sometimes, the police, not so good.
Oh my God. Oh, stop it.
Thank you. I know. It was brave of me. It was.
We shouldn't have had a liberal studio audience. Get them out of here. Get out.
Hey, look, they are just
free
recognizing...
thinkers. We want your go woke mind virus.
Walter, they just respect me for being brave enough to speak the truth. And I know, because I once was as you are now. You've seen Lethal Weapon. You know how cool police are. Heck, you were on an episode of Law & Order. As for you.
Yeah, I mean, SVU had an entire department that actively worked on sex crime cases round the clock. When someone reported a sex crime, they were like, wait, what? Like, we need to solve this immediately, and we're not going to rest until this perpetrator is brought to justice.
Sometimes women would come to them and say, like, I don't have a lot of proof. And the cops would be like, you don't need proof. That's our job, is to find it so we can protect you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just like police in real life, right?
Yeah, so you're saying...
I'm saying that in reality, sometimes, not very good at it.
Stop it! All right, stop that. No.
Thank you.
You're not... I'm an independent thinker!
Well, you see, Walter, the crowd is usually on board for heroes like me when I say stuff like this. But lately, I've been talking to some radical people that want to defund the police.
Oh, yeah, there we go. Oh, my God, yeah.
And what? Oh, I get it.
You're losing your liberal audience, Max.
No, liberals. Bear with me. To help us understand the complex issue of policing, we're going to talk to someone who works to bring people freedom and liberty.
Oh, yeah, I can't... Who is it?
Well, it's civil liberties.
Oh, was that like one of those things where everyone gets to have civil liberties?
Yeah, but including you.
All right, okay. Who?
Joining us via satellite from the New York Civil Liberties Union, we have senior organizer Isabelle Leyva.
So we are with Isabelle from the New York Civil NYCLU. I'm not saying the whole thing.
NYCLU, New York Civil Liberties Union. This is like a MLM style franchise off of the ACLU. like, do you have like an affiliate link?
It's an affiliate. So we're an independent entity. Like, we make our own decisions, but we're an affiliate of the ACLU. Yeah.
Okay, so if you sign up 10 people and they send up 10 people, they can be their own boss and they can get like a chunk of the civil rights.
It's like a Hustler University, right?
No, we are not an MLM, I promise.
I met you with protesting the Strategic Response Group. Now, I try to make videos and raise awareness about the Strategic Response Group. The problem is No one knows what in God's name I'm even talking about when I say the strategic response group. They're like,
Right.
what is that? If you live in New York and you're an activist, you know damn well what that is. And you've had firsthand run-ins with a boot to your face. Isabelle, tell us, what is the strategic response group?
Sure. Thank you for having me. The Strategic Response Group is a unit of the NYPD that was created in 2015 as a counterterrorism unit that would also police protests. So, pretty immediately in 2015, advocates came out against the creation of this unit and said, like, listen, you cannot have a unit that both polices protests and does counterterrorism because there's a real danger in conflating those two things. So
Wait, those things are separate? Like
those
Black Lives
things
Matter
are separate.
protesters? I thought they're all
Yes.
terrorists.
I'm trying to imagine a bunch of people with like signs like on the climate march and a group of
Yeah.
terrorists determined to attack in the United States. And not to be callous, but it's the same picture, right? No?
I think there are some subtle differences there.
Okay.
And by subtle, I mean completely different. And that was really the concern around the creation of this unit.
I mean, the NYPD knows the difference between terrorists and Black Lives Matter protesters, right, Isabelle?
You know, I wouldn't say that they necessarily do. No.
But seriously, like just in their thinking, what is the skill set overlap with how you would deal with peaceful protests?
It's a really good question. And the overlap is militarized crowd control tactics and suppression. That is what they are trained in, despite, being touted as this counterterrorism unit. Their training overwhelmingly focuses on like use of force at protests, like how to conduct mass arrests, how to kettle protesters, which is trapping people with no way out and then arresting them. In their manual, they call that encirclement. But we as protesters and as organizers call it kettling, and they deny the use of that despite it being in their manual.
Is that a legal tactic to take against people exercising the First Amendment?
They are not supposed to be kettling people. That has been made very clear, but it is in their manual and it's something that they do. And what's interesting about that is that they have gone on record denying that despite the mountains of evidence that they've done it. Most notoriously is the Mott Haven protest, which was in June of 2020, when the SRG, there was an 8 p.m. curfew. And right before that, the SRG and other members of the force kettled 163 people, sent dozens of people to the hospital, arrested legal observers and medics. It was one of the most brutal crackdowns we've ever seen here in the city on protest, and that was led by the SRG.
But Isabelle, that was in 2020. Surely they've had proper training since then, and they've grown. They've realized their mistakes. That was so many years. That was so many years ago. It's like slavery, right? Like that was so long ago.
You would hope that they would change trainings, but my position is that no matter how much you train a unit, if it's designed for a purpose, it will do that purpose. And the issue with the SRG is that its purpose is to squash protest with violence. There's no way to retrain that. That's something that doesn't need to exist.
Now, where do these people come from? I assume that the people selected for the SRG are like the top tier intelligence officers of the NYPD. If they're being dispatched to protest,
They just
like,
cream right off the top.
Hostage negotiators, probably like people trained in
De-escalation. Yeah.
Yes. Is that your typical SRG? Paint us a picture. Who joins?
Yeah, who joins? Well, it's voluntary. So the people who join, and this is from inside the department, this quote, are people that are looking for more action. So many cops that join the SRG already have a long track record of misconduct. And officers in the SRG have higher rates of misconduct than other cops. So what you're looking at is cops that actually have worse track records than your average NYPD precinct cop.
Which is saying a lot. That's quite an all-star team right there.
When you hear misconduct, you're not talking about like they're late with their paperwork.
No. We're talking about use of force. We're talking about verbal harassment. We're talking about like arrests without cause. There are lots of different kinds of misconduct. One of the starkest disparities that we see is in use of force complaints. And there's also a huge like racial bias aspect to that, where I believe it's 94% of complainants who filed complaints against SRG officers between 2020 and 2022 were people of color.
Just sort of look at this logically. You would think that since this is a very public-facing organization, like that engaged directly with people during times of like heightened emotions, that you would want your calmer, more rational minds here. Has anyone suggested this to the NYPD?
People have suggested a lot of things to the NYPD. The SRG has been specifically named in reports that come from the Department of Investigation, in lawsuits, in comments from the AG. There have been lots of suggestions. There have been suggestions to stop deploying these officers so heavily. There have been suggestions to retrain these officers. The NYPD seems to genuinely believe that the SRG is keeping people safe and is the expert on protest policing. So those suggestions and recommendations have not been taken into account. And if they have been internally, that has not translated to their conduct in the streets.
But who has oversight over this? The city council? I don't know, sort of like an office in the state?
Yes.
That oversight?
So there's the CCRB, which is the Civilian Complaint Review Board. When you file a complaint against an officer, that's where it goes. And then the CCRB will investigate and issue a recommendation for consequences for that officer. Unfortunately, that is a recommendation, and the NYPD doesn't actually have to follow that recommendation. In terms of broader oversight, theoretically, City Council is supposed to be able to inquire about the NYPD's activities, and then the NYPD largely is falling under the mayor. So the City Council is supposed to be kind of the checks and balances to keep these systems in check. Unfortunately, as we saw last year, we fought really hard to get an oversight hearing on the SRG, basically where the NYPD would have to show up and testify, and council members could ask questions of the NYPD. This hearing was postponed twice. The NYPD refused to show up, said they had conflicts, and then when they eventually did show up, they actually refused to answer any questions about the SRG.
But then what was the negative consequence they faced as a result for this noncompliance?
There was none. There was no negative consequence for that noncompliance, as far as we know. Who knows what conversations happened, but in terms of actual, tangible consequences, there were none.
It's funny, this city council meeting that she's speaking about, we were there.
Yeah.
And it was horrible.
Yeah, there's all these people that showed up to bash the police.
Hundreds of them. Hundreds and hundreds.
With their own personal stories.
Yeah, they testified against the NYPD and specifically the SRG for literally 10 hours.
Yeah, and then they confined their opinions just to their own personal encounters with the police.
And it was negative, so negative. Where is the balanced aspect here?
So we decided to balance it.
Yeah. If the NYPD couldn't take time out of their busy schedule to come to their own disciplinary hearing,
then we were going to show up and speak for them.
You're so brave.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, thank you. Thank you.
All right, here's what you said.
I'm here to speak for the NYPD and our plans for the Strategic Response Group.
Please say your name.
My name is Walter Masterson. I'm here to speak for the NYPD and our plans for the Strategic Response Group. I currently run one of the largest police charities in America. You can learn more about it by Googling 40% Cops. For those of you who don't know, the Strategic Response Group is a unit trained in counterterrorism. Now you might ask yourself, what is terrorism? Well, according to our own training manual, it's Black Lives Matter, Occupy Wall Street, and anti-Trump protesters. The Strategic Response Group has been such a huge success that we are now planning on deploying them to every police precinct in New York City. Yes, the officers responsible for hundreds of civil suits during peaceful protests are now going to be on patrol everywhere you go. Mayor Eric Adams is making huge cuts to every department in New York City except the NYPD. So thank you everyone else for your sacrifice. Lastly, I just want to give a shout out to all the Democrat council members who marched with Black Lives Matter, who marched for women's reproductive rights, then turned around and supported the SRG being deployed in their district. Gail Brewer, Mercedes Narcisse, Oswald Felice, Raphael Salamanca, Salvina Brooks Powers, Diana Alaya, Darlene Neely, Julie Menon, Justin Brennan, thank you very much, sir. Camilla Hanks, Keith Powers, Linda Lee, Marjorie Velasquez, Amanda Farias. Thank you for everyone in the Democratic Party that has helped fund the NYPD and the SRG. We got a little nervous when we saw you marching with Black Lives Matter, but we're glad you pulled through in the end. All right, thank you.
You know, it was really inspiring to hear you speak to so many of the city council members. The look on their faces must have been priceless.
Actually, they had already left at that point.
No, I remember they were definitely there. They made speeches about how the NYPD can't do this to the city council and how important it is to stand up for
yeah, they got their soundbite in and then they left.
Still, it was good of you to stand up for the NYPD. If they couldn't make it, I'm glad you were there.
Thank you, Max.
But I still felt like there was a missing voice in that room. You know?
What was it, Max?
Not to sound like fascist Lorax, but who will speak for the alt-right?
And that's why the left wanted to ban Dr. Seuss.
Whoa. Makes you think. Anyways, here's what I had to say.
1791, when this country was first founded, our founding fathers gave us the Bill of Rights, ensuring that citizens would have the First Amendment right to peacefully assemble and speak their mind. Now, it's worth noting that back then, women and minorities were legally considered objects, like a throw rug or an end table, a lamp. And so, citizens meant white guys, like me. And I am proud to say that 232 years later, the NYPD upholds the originalist interpretation, ensuring that I, above all others, have the right to gather and speak my mind. Everyone else can have First Amendment. You can have all the First Amendment you want when I'm done with it. So says the NYPD. Now, I've heard it said that neutrality favors the oppressor, and I can't even imagine neutrality. It would be terrible. When I go to these protests, NYPD, they come up, they ask about my kids, my vacation plans, they let me into the subway for free. If they talk to me like they talk to some of these guys, I've seen them, push pregnant women to the ground, tackle photographers. I've seen them hit people with bikes, move or I will move you is the first thing they say to people standing peacefully. If they did that to me, or even just if they didn't do violence, none of this would work. None of it. Look, am I supposed to bring my own unprovoked violence to these protests? What am I even paying tax dollars for? I'm a graduate of Andrew Tate's Hustler University, so I understand body language, okay? When cops are out there, they face the danger, they face the threat. So I want you to imagine, me and 30 of my guys, many of whom are unarmed, are facing off against the Gay Straight Alliance, who want basic human rights. Which direction are the cops facing? Which way? That's right, towards the threat, protecting me. Because if they weren't there, some underweight, non-binary librarian might say something mean to me. So thank God the SRG is there to powerbomb them into the pavement preemptively. I just want to thank God, thank Jesus for these men, and I want to thank all of our allies in the city council and in the mayor's office, because I know that you know exactly what I'm saying. And afterwards, we can take some pictures together, and we can talk about how we're finally going to win the race wars. We could talk about how we care about public safety and property value, right? And, we'll know what we're talking about, and they'll know what we're talking about. Everyone knows, but it'll be fun for pretend. So, in closing, I just want to thank the city of New York for taking some of the most violent offenders off the street, domestic abusers, murderers. They're off the street, and they have jobs and guns and badges.
Yes, thank you. You see, they weren't actually allowed to applaud on the day. Some did, but
It's because applause is outlawed in liberal city council.
I think the worst part was, as we said, there was about 10 hours of public testimony. And I got to say, the mood in that room, kind of bleak. Pretty bleak.
It's not, there's no positivity at all.
Yeah, I know. I don't want to take stuff out of context, but here's just a small sample of some of the first-hand experiences people had with the SRG.
There's no de-escalation. They don't know nothing. When they get out with their sticks and their helmets, and they can't wait to do dirty to us.
They would push people into the street and then arrest them for being in the street.
I've been woken up by SRG with a gun to my face. I was pleading, had my hands up for the cop to release him when I was tackled from behind.
After I refused to stop recording them on my phone, I was grabbed, beaten, and forced to my knees.
He was holding his bicycle horizontally across his body, and he used it to strike me several times in the head and face while I was lying on the ground, unable to move.
Which has left me with permanent damage and limited mobility in my upper body.
It was property being damaged.
And made them abandon their belongings.
They plowed their bikes directly into crowds. They tased people. They broke bones, musical instruments, our safety team's bikes. They broke photography equipment to destroy the evidence.
If we had more officers on the job and they were treated with more respect and equitably compensated for the job that they do.
They left a pregnant woman handcuffed on her stomach for over an hour.
Don't understand where you have this notion that we are the ones creating violence. All of these protests that I have been to, the violence that has been started has been by the officers that are there, that are sent there to harass us.
Officer Peter Quigley smashed my face with his baton.
Threatened to play the LRAD, which again is a military weapon, in front of young children at a drag story hour.
I saw a child brutally thrown to the ground.
I've witnessed 3 times SRG members brutally assaulting and arresting a number of individuals who were trying to assist female patients entering a Planned Parenthood clinic on Bleecker Street.
2 people were hospitalized by the brutality of the NYPD that night.
These are really traumatic memories, and so many of us have so many of them.
We did not even know why we were being targeted.
Total spending on this unit is now estimated at more than $133 million.
Disband the SRG. We will no longer fund our own oppression.
Now, you might have noticed a couple of dissenting voices in that crowd.
Yes. Oh, yeah, there was one. What did he say?
Well, he asked the important question. What about property damage?
Right. And, when you have 100 people coming up and talking about how they've been personally injured and just sort of trauma dumping to the city council, you need to bring the conversation back to property damage.
And worth noting that this is not a fellow citizen. This is a city council member proudly serving District 30 in Queens, New York, Robert Holden.
So yes, Robert Holden has never been to a protest before, but he wanted to demonstrate that he's heard about them on television. And this is how he demonstrates it.
If I'm getting bricks thrown at me or firebombs thrown at me, and there's no situation where self-preservation kicks in. It's just sort of, don't curse at me.
Man, talk about de-escalation. Firebombs, bricks, or, if someone curses at me and hurts my feelings.
So today it's mean names and firebombs, but tomorrow...
Yeah, they could be dropping pianos on your heads.
Or an anvil.
Chasing you with rocket-propelled skis.
Or they paint a picture of a tunnel on a brick wall.
Yeah, Walter, it's terrifying. Where does it end?
Or where does it begin, since the premise is made up?
Well, we did talk to Isabelle about it. Let's see what she said.
Yeah, I have been to over 300 protests since 2020, documenting police conduct. I have never seen a wheelbarrow, and I have never seen a firebomb. And I can tell you firsthand that these protests are overwhelmingly nonviolent. I struggle to even think of a time that could be construed to be a violent protest in the way that Robert Holden described at that hearing. These protests are nonviolent, and the people that bring the violence and the escalation are the SRG and the NYPD.
Well, so what's an example of the first act of violence? Maybe there's some misinterpretation, maybe they just said something and you're like, oh, was that sarcastic? And they're like, no, I didn't mean that to be sarcastic, and then it becomes a fight. This thing happens with my wife all the time. Maybe it's something like that?
Yeah, no, I don't think it's something like that. It's more like, so if you're going to a protest, I'll use the Jordan Neely protests for an example. So Jordan Neely was killed by a vigilante on the train who put him in a chokehold. there was a vigil scheduled for the same train station, Broadway Lafayette, where he was killed, I believe 2 or 3 days after his actual death. This vigil had candles. There were organizers giving speeches. We were in the median of the street, and the SRG shows up in full gear with zip ties on their belt, looking like an army. They go into the crowd and they just start grabbing people. They start grabbing an organizer that's on the mic. I believe their justification at that time was that they didn't have a sound permit or something. That was what they said. Like, you can't use a megaphone. They started grabbing people. They threw someone to the ground to the point where their face was bloodied. It became absolute mayhem and chaos. What started as a vigil became chaos because of what the SRG did.
I think in the public imagination, because sometimes if you are especially middle-class, centrist, and white, when you have an interaction like that with the police, they'll be like, hey, can you keep it down? People are trying to sleep. And I think it's important to draw that distinction that conversation did not happen in this case.
No, it's immediate aggression. And you have to also understand that there has to be some reconciliation for the trauma that was endured by New Yorkers from the SRG throughout 2020 and 2021 that there has never been any kind of accountability for from their end. So even if SRG cops in their full gear were to approach people and have a quote unquote conversation, that's threatening to New Yorkers because we know what the SRG is capable of. Their presence on the ground alone is a threat to New Yorkers because we've experienced what they do on the ground.
And this is a story that we have heard time and again from anyone who's done any form of activism in New York. And it's kind of unbearably one-sided.
Yeah, Max. No one talks about how these cops play basketball with kids from the inner city once, maybe twice a year.
Sometimes they think that they're getting pulled over and it's actually ice cream.
Yeah, like no mention of that at all.
Oh my God, it's all like, they hit me with bicycles until I needed stitches.
Yeah, and no one came in and talked about how their uncle is a cop and that how their uncle's really nice.
No, it's all how the police stalked me because I was an activist and they followed me home and they kept arresting me and holding me without charges.
Yeah, just really biased.
Terrible. Any hoozles, we'll be back after this ad break.
Yeah.
Maybe. Welcome back to We Are Not Journalists.
Now, some of you are listening to this episode and thinking to yourself, oh, what's the big deal, guys? It's just a few bad apples.
Just a couple of bad apples.
Just a few bad apples. It's not like there needs to be radical change, structural and...
No, why? For a couple of bad apples? Like, maybe like one of those apples with a little cartoon worm coming out? Bad apple!
You know, the famous saying...
Just keep giving me bad apples.
You know,
bad apples.
It's just a few bad apples, Max.
Right. You know what they say? A couple of bad apples in a barrel? It's fine. You'll never notice. There's so many apples.
Yeah, we even asked big communist liberal Isabelle from NYCLU about bad apples, and this is what she had to say.
So people complain that, like, police misconduct is typically a couple of bad apples. So, like, is there maybe some subtle genius in collecting those bad apples, putting them in a sack, and then throwing that sack at protesters?
I would say no. I would say that one way that we can actually protect our communities is by looking at which units cause the most harm. I think the bad apples myth is that it's a myth. There are no bad apples. This is a system that is designed to do these things. It is designed to cause harm. So no matter how well-intentioned a cop may be, cops don't keep us safe. And that's what the data shows. That's the reality that we're living in. And what's that saying? The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and hoping for a better result.
Oh, sure, she knows that saying, but does she know the saying, a couple of bad apples, not a big deal, go on with your life?
A couple of bad apples is actually the name of my new bakery.
Oh yeah, I heard you're getting into the baking business. How's that going?
Well, I made an apple pie.
Love it.
and I used really good apples, like the best.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
Fresh, organic apples. Love it. Love it.
Absolutely. And then I put in one bad apple.
A bad apple.
Horrible apple. Gross, malformed, discolored.
Oh, a disgusting, terrible apple.
Terrible apple.
And you put it in the pie with the other ones.
With the good apple.
With a bunch of good apples.
Really good apples, Max.
Do you know what that sounds like? It sounds like a good pie.
Yeah, of course. That was the first thing I thought of, too.
Huh. So how are sales?
We're launching our new apple pie today. It's amazing. It's called Just a Few Bad Apples. We take a few great apples, and then we take one really bad apple, like with maggots, and we all put it in the same pie. Would you like to try some?
No.
No? Why not?
If it's a bad apple, that you said,
Okay.
I take a risk.
Kind of feels like you hate apple pie.
No,
What?
I love apple pie.
Would you like to try some?
No.
Do you not like apples?
I like apples, but you got one bad apple in there?
Yeah, it doesn't mean the pie is ruined.
I think it does.
Sounds like you hate apple pie.
Nope. Love apple pie.
Do you hate apples?
I love apple.
Do you hate pie?
I love pie.
But it's just one bad apple. Let's get your wife here. Do you want to try some pie?
5 really delicious apples with 1 bad apple. Y'all maggots, y'all worms.
I'll try it.
Oh, fantastic. Go in. Yeah. Yeah.
That was pretty good.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's
Yeah,
fun.
no
Yeah.
maggots.
You don't taste the maggots or anything like that at all.
No.
No. Thank you for loving America.
Love America and I love apple pie.
Thank you.
I don't think that there is a better possible metaphor for the way that some people view the police than that guy eating a maggoty pie.
As I'm explaining that it's a maggoty pie.
It's like, well, but I love apple pie because I love America. Therefore, this pie can't be that bad. They're going to frame that sketch in a museum someday.
It's the Smithsonian.
Yeah.
I was like, no, I need you to. He's like, no, I'm going to eat it. And I was like, okay. And I was like, well, I guess this also works.
You're just looking at camera being like, very well. We will do this thing I asked you to do.
I was like,
and you agreed to do.
I was like, damn
Sarah?
I need you to not eat the. But sure, I guess you're eating it.
It's already gone. So I think that this is really a bad argument at its core. Huh? Core? Apple?
Oh my God.
I mean, because not only do the people who offer this argument misunderstand the basic figure of speech they're using, but it also presumes that in a police department, the good apples will bring the bad apple around or control them so they don't behave as badly.
Yeah, they don't even know how apples works.
Yeah, but it's also very much not the way police departments work, as we see time and again.
I recently interviewed former police officer Austin Handel.
Former police officer?
Oh, yes. He was fired by his police department.
Oh, for misconduct.
Oh, no. Well, see, he didn't want to send his supervising officer dick pics, so they fired him.
They fired him?
Yeah, they let the chief of police resign, and they fired him for misconduct. I'm not even making... This sounds so
Does it
weird.
sound less insane coming from him?
Yes. So there was a sexting ring going on, and they were sexually harassing the people. And so these were, surely it's just, probably just one bad apple, right? That's dealing with this, right?
Well, and you would think, right? But after looking at it from the top down, even the news actually released that, over 6 or 7 officers were exchanging news with this lieutenant. And then the chief of police, we named him in our lawsuit, and the city allowed him to investigate himself and the lieutenant. And he said that everything was fine, that it was consensual and nothing was wrong with that. So he essentially cleared himself of all wrongdoing. So that way he couldn't be held liable. And he is still the chief of police to this day. Citizens actually go consistently to the city council meetings and demand his resignation, but nothing's happened.
And the crazy thing is, this isn't too different than it is here in New York.
Yeah, I mean, in New York, we have the Civilian Review Board.
Civilian Complaint Review Board.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they make recommendations to the police department.
They're like, please, can you fire this guy?
And then the police department goes,
Yeah, they can literally choose not to follow any of the recommendations.
All of it's non-binding.
Yes, it is this farcical thing so the community feels like they have some authority over their police, but they don't. The police have the only power to police themselves.
And, surely, the people that are higher up are fine. Maybe it's just the untrained officers.
The man on the ground. Yeah, I'm sure if you go up a couple of stages, all that bad stuff goes away.
Yeah.
Well, actually, in Austin's case,
the major who ended up clearing that lieutenant in his investigation, that major was fired from his last police department for stealing 50 guns, 50 guns from evidence. We're supposed to trust his judgment, which obviously was wrong.
So the chain of command here is the major who covered up the crime had been fired from his previous job for stealing 50 guns.
Yes.
And he's covering up the crimes of the lieutenant
who's at the center of the sexual harassment scandal,
demanding nudes from his subordinates. And both of these two bad actors are fine.
Yeah.
They're fine?
Yeah. The major is still the head of that department, and the lieutenant was allowed to resign without any notes on his record to go be a police officer in any state he wants. He currently lives in Florida.
Because they allowed him to resign with no notes on his file. But if the city, when they hired him, would have done an accurate background check, they would have found that he was found in possession of 50 guns and a pair of brass knuckles from the evidence locker. And his reasoning for that was that he said that he was going to make a gun memorial for the police department.
Oh, okay. I thought he was stealing guns for a bad reason. He was just using it for his art?
He was going to make a memorial, Max.
Sorry, I'm an insensitive. I feel like a jerk.
Okay, you know what? I feel so guilty now. I feel like we just bashed this guy just trying to make a gun memorial.
Do what we should do? We should go out and steal a whole bunch of guns so we can make a memorial for this guy and his gun memorial.
Yeah.
That's not illegal, right?
Yeah, the gun memorial, let's finish the job he started.
Yeah. Yeah. If it's not a crime for him to do it, why would it be a crime for us to do it?
Exactly. Yeah, I'm not even a cop, so I won't even have to resign.
No, I think if you steal a bunch of guns from evidence, you become a cop. I think that's where they come from.
Okay, so that's the point that Austin was trying to make.
Well, take that lieutenant for an example. That lieutenant, there's no notes on his file, and his certification, his peace officer certification is still fully intact. He was never placed under investigation. He was allowed to resign and move to Florida, even though there's a good likelihood that he had committed crimes in our state, sexual harassment, that he had been doing this on the clock, just a couple doors down from the chief of police. He could go work anywhere he wanted to right now.
So essentially they're playing a shell game with their worst officers and transferring them from parish to parish.
Precinct
to precinct. Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Why did I say parish?
I don't know.
I don't know.
Perish the thought.
Yeah.
And Austin Handel today is the vice chair of the Lamplighter Project.
Yeah. They protect whistleblowers. Their entire platform is protecting whistleblowers in law enforcement because that's the issue. They're like, even when good cops tell on bad cops, they get fired.
Right. Because you would think the police union would be that champion for whistleblowers, but the police unions typically take the bad apple side.
I feel like there's been a lot of police bashing on this episode, Max. And let me just ask you something. Who are you going to call when you see a homeless person doing drugs inside of an alley?
Department of Homeless Services, maybe? Try to get them a bed, maybe some drug counselors?
Okay. Who are you going to call when you see a person of color having a mental health crisis?
A mental health professional?
Okay, smarty pants. Then who are you going to call when you see a single mother being evicted, refusing to leave without her children's medication?
Human Resources Administration actually has eviction support services, and I definitely wouldn't call a cop. It's just unfortunate that all these organizations I named have had their budgets cut in order to fund the NYPD's massive budget expansion and their robot subway cops.
So yeah, Max, who are you going to call if a child brings a science experiment to a science fair?
I feel like you're implying that it should be the cops. Why would it be the cops?
Well, he's Muslim.
That's terrible. Why would I call the cops?
Well, you didn't hear about that?
Oh, no, this is a real thing, isn't it?
No, so this 14-year-old boy, whose name is Ahmed Mohammed, going to school in Texas, made a digital clock for the science fair.
And his teacher thought it was a bum because his name was Ahmed Mohammed. Oh, yeah, this happened back in 2015. Yay. What else you got?
Okay, well, smarty pants. Who are you going to call if there's a bank robbery?
Okay, yeah. All right, I guess in that case I would call the cops. Would they stop the bank robbery?
No, that's dangerous.
Oh, of course.
Okay. I have a great example. Okay, what if your girlfriend was being stalked by her ex-boyfriend and he was sending her death threats?
I feel like this is something the police are famously bad at intervening with. Would they do anything?
Yeah, I mean, but would they have to wait till the guy does something?
Does something like kill her?
Yeah. But it also has to do it like a few times. It has to be like a pattern, in which case the FBI gets involved and they take over the investigation.
So not super convinced yet.
Okay.
I mean, I can't even think of a circumstance where police...
Oh, okay, you know what? What if there's a school shooting?
I don't know. Let's ask Isabelle about that.
There's another piece that I think people often don't know, which is that the police actually, under our current law, do not actually have an obligation to protect you. It was actually in New York City, I believe, there was a case where a man was on a subway platform and there was a stabber on the loose and he was stabbing people. And there were police on that subway platform. And this man was stabbed in the head, and the police did not intervene until passerbys actually apprehended the person that was attacking him. He tried to sue the city and the NYPD for lack of intervention, and that suit was dropped because there is a Supreme Court ruling that essentially said that the police don't have any... they're not forced to step in to protect you. They're only forced to protect people that are already in their custody. So the idea that cops will swoop in and stop a crime from happening is a myth that's been created by the media, shows like Law and Order. It's not real. And that same Supreme Court case is used when cops do things like stand outside a school during a school shooting and don't intervene. There's actually no...
Wait, Isabelle, they intervened. Like
Right.
in Uvalde, they went in there and they rescued their own children.
They did, and then they arrested some parents.
They arrested the parents that were trying to go in.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't want to hear that they didn't intervene at all.
Yeah, they intervene in some ways.
I think this is a wonderful time to introduce a brand new segment to our show.
Max's Curse of Knowledge.
This is the segment of our show where we did a bunch of research that was really disturbing, and you also have to know this as well. We're not going to be miserable by ourselves.
So you might be saying to yourself, well, Isabelle's take is pretty radical. The police don't have to protect people?
Yeah, that's like a recent ruling. You know, that's like some liberal Supreme Court mumbo jumbo.
Yeah, it is from the Supreme Court. Going back to 1855.
Oh, so that's like before
the institution of modern policing? Yes.
Oh, okay, so that's...
The Supreme Court was ruling off of a sheriff's duty, where they ruled in South versus Maryland that if a sheriff is working on the orders of court and he sees, for instance, a large mob taking the law into their own hands...
Like a lynch mob?
I don't want to say what kind of mob it is, but yes, definitely a lynch mob. The sheriff doesn't have to do anything about it, because his only duty is to enforce the explicit will of the courts.
Okay, but Max, that's the 1800s. That's not how the police operate today.
1981, Warren versus D.C. Couple women were calling the cops because they heard a woman being assaulted by two men. Cops showed up, refused to come in. The women called out the window for help. And so the men came up and assaulted them, and the cops continued to do nothing. D.C. said, not our problems. The Supreme Court agreed.
Okay, but Max, that's the 1980s.
2005, Town of Castle Rock versus Gonzalez. The police did not enforce a restraining order against a guy who then came to his wife's house and murdered their 3 children.
Okay, wait.
Supreme Court said they don't have to enforce a restraining order.
Okay, you know what? This is a comedy podcast. Let's end on a...
2012, Rosita versus New York City, our hometown thing. He was literally getting stabbed and a cop hid behind a wall. And the court said, that's fine. We wouldn't want you to get stabbed.
Listen, Max. It's the most dangerous job in the country.
17th! It's behind construction workers and pizza delivery drivers. When I back the blue, it's the blue of the Domino's guy.
Okay, Max, I think you're setting a really awful tone for this episode, and you're making it seem that sometimes the police are kind of bad. What the hell? What's happening? What's happening?
You hear that, Walter?
Yeah, I said that maybe in some circumstances the police are not good. Wow. Wait, what? What's going on?
They're cheering for you, Walter, because as a white man, you have done the bravest thing you possibly can.
Oh, my God. And I didn't even have to apologize.
No. All you had to do was say that an institution that protects your interests at the expense of women and people of color may not be perfect. Take it in, Walter. You are finally woke.
Hey! Stop it! Whoa! Stop it!
Whoa! Stop it! Oh, hey! All right. This is the last show we're doing with a live audience.
And one more thing before we go. We're about to enter a new year. It might be a good time to, call up old friends, old relatives, and, people that were once in your life, they're not in your life anymore.
Yeah.
And tell them, exactly how you feel, that you miss them, because, tomorrow's not guaranteed.
Walter, you're right.
Thank you for calling the Central Texas office of U.S. Senator Ted Cruz. We are currently unavailable at this time. Please leave a brief message with your name, phone number, email address, and zip code. Thank you.
Hey, Ted. I mean, it's been a while. I just wanted, I think I don't get to say it enough, but I think you're a huge piece of shit. Max, do you have anything?
Yeah, no. We love you, and we would love if you resigned and never took public office again.
Go yourself.
Thank you. Yeah. You know what? That actually made me feel better. It's cleansing.
Yeah. Whew. Okay. Well, I think that phone call will be the beacon of light that carries us into the new year.
Because there's more that unites us than divides us in this country of ours, and I think we can all agree on one thing.
That ACAB definitely includes Paw Patrol.
That's right.
Yeah. That adorable little dog Chase from Paw Patrol is a class traitor.
You're on notice, Paw Patrol.
Stop letting your kids watch propaganda all day.
Marshall, you're cool. You can still be a firefighter. No one's got a beef with you.
Fascist piece of art since Ezra Pound.
Pretty much. So until next time, everyone, I'm Maximilian Clark.
And I'm Walter Masterson.
And we
are not
journalists. Yeah.
With the music, and it'll take us out.
Paw Patrol, basically the Nazis.
Looking for a new career? Welcome to Do HVAC Training Service Center in North Charleston. Enroll today in our comprehensive HVAC training hands-on field experience-based program, covering troubleshooting, maintenance, installation, and more on various HVAC systems and ductwork. We offer EPA and NAEP preparation and testing, along with various certifications. Enjoy payment options. Achieve certification in under 5 months. Enroll now for your new journey of skill development and career advancement. Log on to dewhvactrainingsc.com to inquire.